We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Coming up in the next hour. Donald Trump hits the ground running, targets the Biden administration for ills plaguing the economy, also invokes religion, says he survived assassination attempt as God was on his side, predicts incredible victory in November election.
Tonight, with faith and devotion, I proudly accept your nomination for President of the United States. Thank you.
Trying to strike a chord with the middle class, Trump rakes up the issue of illegal immigration and inflation, says will bring down prices from day one in the office. We'll be right back after a short break.
As the world gears up for the biggest sporting extravaganza, Olympics 2024, we at DD India are all set to bring you reports, reactions and all the latest action from Ground Zero. Watch DD India's super exclusive show, Cheer for Bharat. Only on DD India from July the 22nd at 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT. Get ready to cheer for Indian athletes at the Paris Olympics 2024.
We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Coming up in the next hour. Donald Trump hits the ground running, targets the Biden administration for ills plaguing the economy, also invokes religion, says he survived assassination attempt as God was on his side, predicts incredible victory in November election.
Tonight, with faith and devotion, I proudly accept your nomination for President of the United States. Thank you.
Trying to strike a chord with the middle class, Trump rakes up the issue of illegal immigration and inflation, says will bring down prices from day one in the office. Once defiant about continuing the presidential election run, US President Joe Biden now soul-searching about dropping out as intense pressure continues to mount from within the party. Bangladesh remains on boil. Death toll mounts to 19 as thousands of students clashed with armed police in Dhaka on Thursday. Protest against quotas in government jobs shows no signs of abating. And on to the details now. Former U.S. President Donald Trump formally accepted Republican Party's presidential nomination at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Trump began his speech with his description on being shot at rally earlier this week and said only because he happened to move his head did he survive.
When I heard a loud whizzing sound and felt something hit me really, really hard on my right ear, I said to myself, wow, what was that? It can only be a bullet, and moved. I felt very safe because I had God on my side. I felt that.
Well, Trump also predicted incredible victory in November election as he called for an end to discord and division on the note of unity.
I stand before you this evening with a message of confidence, strength, and hope. 4 months from now, we will have an incredible victory, and we will begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country.
Also, the helmet and jacket of the firefighter who died at the rally was displayed to the side behind him on the stage. Trump went on to kiss the helmet of Corey Cormentor, and a moment of silence was also observed in his honor. Melania Trump also joined Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner and other family members in the arena. This was his first major speech since the assassination attempt. Donald Trump focused on most election campaign topics in his speech at the RNC, reminding the gathering that during his tenure, everything from security of the nation to its economy, he hit the ground running and laid out clearly throughout plans for his action on a host of issues. The most talked about was the issue of inflation, which has been a rallying point for the Republicans. Trump promised action on day one if he makes it to the White House.
And starting on day one, we will drive down prices and make America affordable again. People can't live like this. Under this administration, our current administration, groceries are up 57%, gasoline is up 60 and 70%, mortgage rates have quadrupled. Republicans have a plan to bring down prices and bring them down very, very rapidly. By slashing energy costs, we will in turn reduce the cost of transportation, manufacturing, and all household goods.
Also, Trump touched upon the issue of illegal immigrants, calling them invaders.
I will end the illegal immigration crisis by closing our border and finishing the wall, most of which I've already built. Most of the wall is already built, and we built it through using the funds because what's better than that? We have to stop the invasion into our country that's killing hundreds of thousands of people a year. We're not going to let that happen.
Further, Trump tried to rally the minority voters with him, alleging that the immigrants outcompete blacks and Hispanics for jobs in the U.S.
And you know who's being hurt the most by millions of people pouring into our country? The black population and the Hispanic population, because they're taking the jobs from our black population, our Hispanic population, and they're also taking them from unions. The unions are suffering because of it.
Well, true to his word, earlier Trump refrained from direct hits at the US President Joe Biden, naming his just once, but hitting out at his policies for the last 4 years.
The term once. Biden, I'm not going to use the name anymore, just one time. The damage that he's done to this country is unthinkable. It's unthinkable. Together we will restore vision, strength, competence, and we're going to have a thing called common sense making most of our decisions.
Trump once again repeated his earlier statements on Ukraine conflict and the Middle East situation, promising an end to hostilities in both the places.
If you took the 10 worst presidents in the history of the United States, think of it, the 10 worst, added them up, they will not have done the damage that Biden has done. Only going to use the term once. Biden, I'm not going to use the name anymore, just one time. The damage that he's done to this country is unthinkable. It's unthinkable. Together we will restore vision, strength, competence, and we're going to have a thing called common sense making most of our decisions. Been part of. Nobody can believe what's happening. War is now raging in Europe and the Middle East. A growing specter of conflict hangs over Taiwan, Korea, the Philippines, and all of Asia. And our planet is teetering on the edge of World War III. And this will be a war like no other war because of weaponry. The weapons are no longer army tanks going back and forth shooting at each other. These weapons are obliteration. It's time for a change. This administration can't come close to solving the problems. We're dealing with very tough, very fierce people. They're fierce people.
And Caroline Malone joins us from Washington, D.C. for more on this. Well, Caroline, as he opened his speech, Trump pledged to be a president for all of America, and a somber telling of the assassination attempt. Stunning departure from his pugnacious style, invoking religion and God during the convention of the Conservative Party. How do you see all this?
Well, absolutely, yes. He did certainly start off his speech in a way that was very different from previous speeches. You know, retelling and saying it was a painful story, but retelling the story of the near assassination attempt on him just a few days ago, and how he said as a result of that, you know, he plans to unite the country, and also that, you know, he appreciates every moment because of this near-death experience, you know, as many people have described it. He also made a number of pledges, but what we didn't really hear was, with all these pledges, what the plans are to actually get to these promised achievements. So, you know, everything from reducing inflation and improving the economy, through to closing the border and dealing with immigration, through to solving the wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East. And we didn't hear any detail, actually, of how he plans to do that. And I think what we will end up seeing now is the reaction from the rest of the US, particularly from the Democrats, and particularly those that have in the past and no doubt will continue to do as well in the future, fact check Trump to make sure that people are getting the facts about what he said and whether what he said has been entirely truthful. You know, I think one example potentially of that is this chart that he had on the stage behind him. Now, he made reference to this chart because he said it was the chart that was put up during the rally when he was in Butler, Pennsylvania, that he turned to look at, which essentially meant that the bullet missed his head and only scraped past his ear, essentially saving his life. But this was a chart showing the numbers of people coming into the country illegally, he said, and it showed a low point during the last Trump administration. I think to add context to that, you know, we need to remember that during the last administration, it was COVID. And so people were not traveling around the world as much as they normally would. Right. And, you know, the Trump administration introduced something called Title 42, which has to do with an emergency health order because of the pandemic, which meant that people couldn't come into the country. You know, and that was true for a lot of different nationalities and not just at the southern border. So there's a lot of context and a lot of detail that people will now be challenging Trump about, wanting to really hear how he plans to do all these wonderful things that he's announced he'll do in this speech.
Right, Caroline, as you mentioned, there was a chart behind him. He returned to his signature topic, that was immigration, and his plans to launch what he said will be the largest deportation operation in American history, as he said that America has become a dumping ground. Also, he spoke about inflation, as you told us, and how he will bring down prices from day one. How do you see all that?
Well, I mean, I think that's for Trump to answer ultimately, how he can bring inflation down from day one. I mean, inflation has come down, I will say, in the US over the last year and a half. It's certainly down from the highs of a couple of years ago. But the cost of living is still making a lot of people suffer here. And that's why the economy is such an issue that resonates with people, that resonates with voters. It's got a lot of Republicans really pushing for Trump to, for his support ultimately, because they want to see the cost of living become more affordable. Even though prices are not increasing as much as they used to, there is a wage gap. People aren't earning as much money comparatively, and therefore they're spending more on their expenses than they can afford to in some cases. So that is a huge topic that people can really, have sympathy with and relate to as well. The other is the border. And, this is something that Republicans have been campaigning on really for many months, if not years. It's a very strong Republican agenda item. This idea that, as Trump has put it, there are criminals coming into the United States, and those criminals are largely responsible for this crime wave that we are apparently seeing across the US. Now, of course, if you were to look at the data on that, there are a large number of people coming into the US, higher than before. But actually, clearly, there's a lot of crime that's happening within the United States that has nothing to do with immigration at the same time. And while crime is going up in some places, it's going down in others. So, the picture is a little bit more complicated than the one that Trump paints. Having said that, it resonates with voters. And it resonates with voters because the Republicans have been speaking about it for a long time, and including on conservative media, which, if you're a member of the Republican Party, often people will only be watching that media. And so that's the messaging that they will be getting. But certainly that will be another thing that Trump is challenged on in the days to come after this speech, making strong claims about he's going to close the border on day one. But people want to know how he plans to do that and what the ramifications of that will be. The other thing he's promised to do on day one is to allow companies to, quote, drill, baby, drill. By that, he means energy companies, oil and gas companies, giving them permission essentially to drill in a way that they haven't during the Biden administration. The Biden administration has been pushing more for emissions reducing plans, so things such as promoting electric vehicles. Trump's also promised on day one to get rid of that, to scrap the subsidies for electric vehicles. So in a lot of ways, a reversal of climate change measures.
All right. Also, Trump spoke about two wars currently waging in Europe and the Middle East and how it would have never happened if he was the president. But he made no mention of how he would stop either of those conflicts, proposing to cut off U.S. aid to foreign countries. Would this be a game changer for him ahead of the polls in November?
Well, you're absolutely right. He's spoken of these plans, but we don't have the details of how he plans to enact these ideas. In the last Trump administration, he was very strong on pushing NATO allies, those in North America and Europe, to spend more on defense. That became a huge item. In the last few months, he's threatened to not support NATO allies if they're not spending more. In particular, if Russia was to attack a NATO ally, he said he'd let Russia do whatever it wants, essentially, if people are not spending as much as they have pledged to as part of NATO. Now, there's a big change with NATO in the last few months and years because of Ukraine, because of defending Ukraine, and individual countries, not as a result of NATO, but individual countries within NATO have been supporting Ukraine. And at the recent summit here in the United States, a record number of countries are now spending more on their defense, which is largely to do with Ukraine and this concern about aggression from Russia. So, it will be interesting to see when Trump, speaks more on this item, if he has any details really of how he would, quote, end the war in Ukraine. Potentially one way would be trying to force Ukraine to accept where Russia is standing right now, the parts of Ukraine that it's taken in the eastern part of the country, and trying to force the leader of Ukraine, Zelensky, to accept that somehow. It's unclear really, though, how the Ukrainian people would ever accept that level of a ceasefire. So we'll have to wait and see what details the Republicans and Trump come out with.
All right. He seemed to be extremely confident anyways about winning the presidential election, and it ended with win, win, win. Thank you so much, Caroline, for all that information from Washington. And moving on, Eric Trump called his father the greatest fighter I have ever seen.
Under President Donald Trump, the swamp will be drained. America will be respected. Our cities will be safe. Our streets will be clean. And our border will once again be secure. We will have peace. We will have prosperity. Your hard-earned tax dollars will enrich a better America, not be squandered in corrupt foreign nations. Education will be handed back to the states. We will no longer be 30th in the world. We will be first. The whole world saw your strength as you stood up. You wiped the blood off your face. And you put your fist in the air in a moment that will be remembered as one of the most courageous acts in the history of American politics. You shouted, "Fight! Fight! Fight!"
Hogan took to the stage at the Republican National Convention and delivered a fiery speech in support of former President Donald Trump. Also, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris on Thursday slammed former President Donald Trump and his running mate, U.S. Senator J.D. Vance, calling their 2025 project as extreme and divisive. Harris attended a campaign rally in North Carolina. This is Harris's 15th trip to North Carolina since she took office in 2020. Harris slammed J.D. Vance for not talking about Project 2025 in a speech at the convention. While attacking Trump, Vice President Harris argued that references to unity at RNC speeches do not accurately portray Republican political aims. Well, the walls appear to be closing in on Joe Biden. The U.S. president is facing the strongest calls yet to step aside and withdraw his candidacy for a second term. He's currently self-isolating, having tested positive for COVID-19. Benji Haya has been following a difficult 24 hours for the president. Take a look.
The avalanche of pressure on Joe Biden to stand down has picked up speed significantly as concerns grow over his health, age and fitness for office. Lawmakers at the very top of the Democratic Party, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, are making it known, albeit through media leaks, that they think President Biden has little or no chance of beating Donald Trump. Even Barack Obama has pitched in, reportedly telling allies that his once vice president needs to seriously consider the viability of his candidacy. Weeks on from a stumbling debate performance, recent polls show nearly 2/3 of Democrat voters believe Biden should remove himself from the presidential race. The White House and Biden's campaign remain undeterred. So far, the 81-year-old has served up a temperate, stubborn defiance. But if you take it as a given that there is dissent at the very top of the party, the president's days as a candidate could well be numbered. He is the figurehead of a party disunited, a stark contrast from Republicans who are falling in line behind their nominee following Trump's close brush with death. Benji Haya in Washington reporting for DD India.
Well, former President Donald Trump met with Secret Service Director Kim Cheetle on Tuesday, with the meeting coming amid intense scrutiny of the Secret Service's handling of the rally at which Trump was shot. As per various news outlets, meeting took place at the Republican presidential candidate's hotel in Milwaukee. The meeting comes 3 days after the shooting at his rally in Pennsylvania, which left Trump with a bleeding ear. Though it was not clear what was discussed, Cheetle said that the shooting at Trump's rally was unacceptable and that she would not resign. Top Republicans in the U.S. Congress have called for her to resign. She's agreed to testify before the U.S. House of Representatives Oversight Committee on July 22nd for a hearing. And Bangladesh continues to simmer as 19 people have been killed and hundreds of others injured in countrywide protests so far. 13 people were killed on Thursday alone as thousands of students clashed with armed police in Dhaka. The worst day of violence so far in protest in Bangladesh against a policy that sets quota for the allocation of government jobs. Hundreds were injured as police fired tear gas and rubber bullets to break up a group of protesters who torched vehicles, police posts and other establishments. Protesters also attacked on the Bangladesh television headquarters in Dhaka. The Bangladesh authorities cut some mobile internet services to quell anti-quota protest also. Meanwhile, country's law minister Anisul Haq said a judicial committee is going to be formed to probe all the deaths centering the ongoing quota reform protest. He also reiterated his call for withdrawing students' movements. The United Nations has also urged the Bangladesh government to protect the protesting students demanding quota reforms in the government jobs against any form of threat or violence. And moving on, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met Russia's Vice Minister of Defense Alexei Kryvchuk in Pyongyang on Thursday and discussed the importance of the two country militaries to unite more firmly to defend world peace and justice. Kim and Russia's Vice Minister of Defense Alexei shared the need for military cooperation between the two countries to defend mutual security interest. Russia's Vice Minister of Defense also conveyed greetings from Russian President Vladimir Putin to Kim. And Japan's Chief of Army Staff, General Yoshida, lauded closer South Korean military ties as mutual concerns grow over China and North Korea. The top uniformed officers of Japan, the United States and South Korea on Thursday pledged to keep boosting trilateral cooperation to achieve regional and global peace amid growing security challenges posed by China and North Korea. The highest-ranking uniformed officer has agreed to continue to strengthen trilateral security cooperation to advance peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Yoshida called on Japan, South Korea and the United States to demonstrate their strong unity domestically and globally to ensure regional peace and stability. And Laura Westbrook joins us for more on this. Well, Laura, Yoshida called on Japan and South Korea and the United States to demonstrate their strong unity domestically and globally to ensure regional peace. What do we make out of it?
Yes, we have had a statement from these three joint chiefs, from the defense chiefs from the United States, South Korea and Japan, where they really reaffirmed that they want to strengthen trilateral cooperation. They also urged North Korea to cease its destabilizing activities, including its nuclear development program, and also they condemned North Korea for its expanding ties with Russia. They also said that they opposed unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force in the Indo-Pacific that was really targeted at China. And they said they called on China they called China's activities escalatory, dangerous and aggressive in the South China Sea. But analysts have also said particularly noteworthy coming out of this meeting is the increased bilateral cooperation between South Korea and Japan. These two countries are countries that have long been at odds. They have a rather acrimonious history that dates back to Japan's colonial occupation of the Korean Peninsula. But in the face of what they see as a growing aggressive China, they are increasingly coming together.
All right, Laura. Also, Japan and South Korea meeting shows just how far the bilateral relationship has come under South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, and that will benefit both the countries. How do you analyze this?
Yes, indeed. We have seen these two countries growing increasingly close in the last few years, particularly under President Yoon Suk-yeol's leadership. And as well, the United States, Japan and South Korea are also increasingly coming together. This follows a trilateral summit that those three countries held together in Camp David last year. And I spoke to an analyst, Drew Thompson, from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and he told me that South Korea is increasingly catching on to looking at that its security interests extend beyond North Korea and into the region emanating from China. He said that this is a recent development and that this is something that Japan has been saying, but this is now something that South Korea is concerned about. And so that's also part of the reason why we're seeing these two countries come together, because in the face of what they see as that growing aggressiveness from China, coming together to form a collective security strategy is what they're doing. And so we have seen the United States, Japan, and South Korea hold military exercises in the past month. And on the other side, we've seen China hold military drills with Belarus. And this was in the south of the country near Ukraine. China and Russia are also holding their own military exercises in the past week. And they departed from the naval port in China's southern Guangdong province and are reportedly taking place in the South China Sea.
All right. So South Korea is keenly looking into its security right now. Thank you so much, Laura, for giving us all that update from there. And still to come on DD India News Hour. France's lower house sat for the first time since the inconclusive election on July 7th left the country with a hung parliament.
As the world gears up for the biggest sporting extravaganza, Olympics 2024, we at DD India are all set to bring you reports, reactions and all the latest action from Ground Zero. Watch DD India's super exclusive show, Cheer for Bharat. Only on DD India from July the 22nd at 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT. Get ready to cheer for Indian athletes at the Paris Olympics 2024.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Pakshi Khurana. Time now for a quick recap of the headlines. Donald Trump hits the ground running, targets the Biden administration for its plaguing the economy, also invokes religion, says he survived assassination attempt as God was on his side, predicts incredible victory in November election. Trying to strike a chord with the middle class, Trump rakes up the issue of illegal immigration and inflation, says will bring down prices from day one in the office. Once defiant about continuing the presidential election run, US President Joe Biden now soul-searching about dropping out as intense pressure continues to mount from within the party. Bangladesh remains on boil. Death toll mounts to 19 as thousands of students clashed with armed police in Dhaka on Thursday. Protest against quotas in government jobs shows no signs of abating. Well, moving on, France's lower house has sat for the first time since the inconclusive election on July 7th left the country with a hung parliament and no certainty of the composition of the new government. The Speaker, Yael Braun-Pivet, who is from President Macron's party, was re-elected to the role. DD India correspondent Ross Cullen reports for more. Take a look.
MPs convened for the first time on Thursday since the general election earlier this month produced no clear result, with no one party gaining a majority, meaning that France has a hung parliament and also currently a caretaker government. Now, one of the first jobs for the new and returning MPs on Thursday was to vote for the position of Speaker of the National Assembly, and there will likely now follow weeks of political discussion between the parties to work out if there is a roadmap to form a future government. Now, a lot of the attention will be focused on the left wing. 4 leftist parties ran under the umbrella ticket in the election of the new Popular Front. They were the Greens, the Socialists, the Communists and the France Unbowed Party, and they are the largest bloc in Parliament, and so they are likely to form the dominant force of any possible future coalition. The caretaker administration here in France will remain in place for at least the duration of the Olympic Games, which kick off in the French capital next week. Ross Cullen in Paris, reporting for DD India.
Well, the Kremlin said on Thursday that Russia would consider any plans to establish a permanent presence of NATO warships in the Black Sea as a threat given the alliance's involvement in the Ukraine conflict. Dasha Chernyshova is in Moscow with more.
Moscow has vowed to respond to what it calls concentrated presence of NATO warships in the Black Sea. Commenting on Ukraine's new maritime security strategy, which aims to ensure NATO's constant presence in the Black Sea, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia will do everything possible to ensure its own security. He explained that Moscow perceives NATO warships in the Black Sea as an additional threat to its security, especially given increased NATO involvement in Ukraine. The Kremlin also rejected accusations that Russia poses a threat to Europe, arguing that Moscow is defending its interests in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesman also warned that the EU is growing more militarized and confrontational. Peskov explained that EU chief Ursula von der Leyen's idea to turn the bloc into a military union once again confirms the attitude of European states towards militarization, escalating tensions, confrontation, and relying on what he called confrontational methods in their foreign policy. Peskov explained that while joint defense and security policy has always been a part of the EU integration process, it has never been the bloc's main direction of development. Dasha Chernyshova, reporting in Moscow for DD India.
And Ukraine's President Zelensky has signed an agreement with the UK that guarantees support for Kyiv's defence and industrial complex. He joined a newly elected UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Oxfordshire with more than 40 other European leaders for a summit on security, energy and immigration. Stuart Smith reports for more.
The European Political Community Summit, which brought together these leaders, was launched after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Since the beginning, London has been at the forefront of support to Kyiv, and new Prime Minister Keir Starmer was eager to reassure President Zelensky and other European leaders that this won't change. Recently, the UK went even further than the US when it comes to military support, saying that Kyiv could decide for itself whether to fire British-made missiles anywhere in Russia, as long as it's for defensive purposes and follows international humanitarian law. That's not a stance most other NATO nations support for their own military aid, but at the EPC meeting, President Zelensky called on allies to allow long-range strikes on Russia with Western weapons, claiming the fewer restrictions we have, the more Russia will seek peace. The president also claimed they had stopped the Russian advance on Kharkiv and that while Russia had lost tens of thousands of citizens, it had gained nothing significant. Volodymyr Zelensky took the opportunity to condemn Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, who recently visited Moscow and met with Donald Trump, telling leaders that if someone in Europe tries to resolve issues behind our backs, if someone wants to make some trips to the capital of war to talk, and perhaps promise something against our common interests or at the expense of Ukraine, then why should we consider such a person? European leaders are preparing for the possibility Donald Trump will become the next US president and weaken support for Ukraine. The Ukrainian defense minister said on Thursday, whatever the outcome of the US elections, we will find solutions. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said he expected US support to continue, regardless of who wins the election. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov claimed Russia has not and does not present any threat to anyone in the European Union and said Russia was just defending its interests because EU countries refuse to consider Russia's concerns. Stuart Smith in London, reporting for DD India.
Well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky acknowledged in an interview published on Thursday that a victory for Donald Trump in the US election in November would be difficult for his country, but Ukrainians were prepared. Zelensky, speaking to the BBC while attending the European Political Community meeting in London, questioned what would be the price of Donald Trump's plan to end the war in Ukraine.
Everybody will be happy if one person in the world doesn't depend Donald Trump or not. Okay, Donald Trump. If one person in the world, and this person Donald Trump, can stop the war during 24 hours, The question is, what the price?
Also, Ukrainian leader said his country needs strong support from Britain's new Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
We need very strong support from Prime Minister. We need this decision about long distance weapon, long range, to use it. We need it very much. They targeting our hospitals, schools, universities. Like I said to you, they targeting our just civilians. We just want to answer to the exactly to the point where from there they target us.
All right, moving on, in Jammu and Kashmir, a massive search operation is currently underway in Doordarshan district following the martyrdom of 4 soldiers, including a captain in the Desa forest on Monday night. 2 army soldiers received injuries during a gunfight with terrorists in a remote forest village in Doordarshan district early on Thursday, even as security forces persisted with their intense operations. Despite inclement weather and challenging terrain, security forces are conducting the operation to track down the terrorists. And for more, Tahir Nadeem joins us from Doda. Well, Tahir, the counter-terrorism operation is still underway. Search for the terrorist continues. What's the latest at your end?
If we see at the site of this operation, a significant development since the terrorists attacked the temporary picket which was developed for this operation only. Since last 32 hours, because of the heavy downpour, low visibility because of the dense fog, intense operation is still going on. Attack is not being made by with the raiding those terrorists which are on the in since last 32 years. But the security forces are carrying on with their operation. They are facing many difficulties here, not only the terrain, but according to defense experts, those raiding ultras, they don't use cell phones. They go to villages and live with the locals. They live either in the caves or they live in the woods, dense woods. And for food, they buy it from the bakkarwals, the moving bakkarwals. If they have to source it from the context, it comes through a chain which does not lead to them. And
all right.
The other thing, they don't use they use the radio messenger for sending the messages to be intercepted. These are the same difficulties, but still, security forces are very confident they will soon track them.
All right, Tahir, we're not able to get your audio clearly. We'll come back to you again. Right now, moving on. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the next episode of his radio program Man Ki Baat. PM Modi took to social media platform X to share the day and date as 28th July Sunday. He also expressed happiness on the efforts of the youth to transform society. He encouraged the audience to keep sending inputs as well. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. In India's northeast state of Assam, the cabinet on Thursday approved a bill to abolish the Assam Muslim Marriages and Divorce Registration Act and rules of 1935, which permitted underage marriages under specific conditions. The state's chief minister, Himanta Biswa Sarma, made the statement and said the repealing bill 2024 will be presented during the upcoming monsoon session of the assembly. India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri will be on a 2-day official visit to Bhutan from Friday. This will be his first visit abroad after assuming charge. During this visit, Misri will meet Prime Minister Shering Tobgay, Foreign Minister D.N. Tangel and Foreign Minister Pema Chodron, among others. Misri will also receive an audience with Bhutanese King Jigme Khesar Namgyel Wangchuk. And still to come on DD India News Hour. In cricket, India will face Pakistan on the first day of 2024 Women's Asia Cup on Friday.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Pakshi Khurana, and moving on as rain continues in other parts of India. The northeastern state of Assam is seeing improvement in its flood situation. The number of inundated districts has reduced to 13. The regional meteorological center in Guwahati predicted no rains for the next 2 days. However, the Brahmaputra river is flowing above the danger level in some areas, including Nimati Ghat, Tezpur, Dhubri and Karimganj. And Momita Biswas joins us from Guwahati on this. Well, Momita, what is the current situation in Assam? Some improvement there. A relief and rescue operation is also underway. How is it going?
Yes, the current flood situation in the state of Assam is showing a very positive trend. And because from last 48 hours, no such death has been reported in the state, according to the Assam State Disaster Management Authority. If we talk about the numbers, like currently, only 13 districts are under flooded and around 700 villages comes under the 13 districts. And if we talk about how much inmates are there in the relief camps, so far there are 76 relief camps which has decreased a lot, and near about 13,000 inmates are still there in the relief camps. If we talk of the relief and rehabilitation then the government is doing every possible steps, like the food, water, medicine, and every requirement that is needed in the flood time has been provided by the authority. I'd also like to mention that not only the government or the authorities, but the local NGOs, the schools, the colleges, and many regional political parties are also coming up and distributing, relief materials in the relief camps. And one more thing is that, like after flood, in some areas, the after flood effect is very bad. Like the waterborne diseases get erupt in those areas. So the government, the authorities are frequently visiting those areas, and they are, fogging those areas. They are bleaching those areas so that
All right, situation improving there and relief work going on in full swing. Thank you, Momita, for all that information from there. And moving on, following prediction by India's Meteorological Department, heavy rains lashed parts of India's western state of Gujarat. The IMD had forecasted very heavy rainfall in the state till 22nd of July. Well, a wildfire that broke out in a forested area near Turkey's Izmir airport forced the airport to shut down, and flights were diverted to nearby cities. Firefighters battled the wildfire, dropping water from a helicopter as the blaze burnt large swathes of land. Turkey dispatched 7 planes and 16 helicopters to fight the fire, along with 35 fire trucks. Budget air carrier Pegasus said the Izmir Idnan Menderes airport had been closed temporarily, and its inbound flights were diverted to and landed at Bodrum Airport. Also, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck northern Chile on Thursday with no tsunami warning immediately issued. The United States Geological Survey said the epicenter of the tremor was located 164 miles east of the coastal city of Antofagasta. The U.S. tsunami warning system said there was no tsunami risk from the earthquake. There were no immediate reports of any loss of life or damage to property after the earthquake. Well, you're watching DD India News. Time now for some sports news. The first day of the 2024 Women's Asia Cup on Friday will see the big clash between Indian women's cricket team and Pakistan at the Rangiri Dambola International Cricket Stadium. India will come in the game as the defending champions and have won the tournament 7 times. They will also have an 11-3 lead over Pakistan in women's T20 international meetings. On the other hand, Pakistan enters the event after an inconsistent run of results in their bilateral commitments, but they do not have the confidence to upstage India as they did in the 2022 edition of the tournament at Sylhet in Bangladesh. And Dr. Ahmed Moyun Farooqi joins us from Kataragma in Sri Lanka. Well, Ahmed, India have won Asia Cup tournament 7 times and will come in as defending champions. Big clash today there.
Lepakshi, yes, you're right. India has had a very strong kind of a performance earlier in the previous editions. In fact, over the last 20 years, if you see, India has won 7 championships in the Asia Cup, limited overs as well as T20 format included. This is, a very remarkable kind of an outcome as compared to what we see with respect to other events. Here, India has had a very strong showing in each and every format, except there was one event wherein Bangladesh had come up trumps, but even there, India had performed very well. Now, on the back of very good performances over the last few months, India will be looking forward to forge ahead and perform well, which will be, a very good kind of a practice for getting a very good balance in the side before it heads for the T20 World Cup. At the moment, as of now, India is riding on a very strong performance back home, having faced South African team, as well as the other championship wherein India had a complete 5-0 washout. And this was, a remarkable outcome for India. The top order is clicking well. The bowling unit is performing very well. Pooja Vastrakar has come up very well and has evolved into a very good option for the Indian side. Of course, Harmanpreet's batting as well as her timely performances with the ball also have helped India in a very big manner. Now, on the other hand, Pakistan, although they have not had a very good showing this year, they had a very bad performance, having lost to England 0-3, having lost to West Indies 1-4. They will be looking forward to, bring some change in their side and making amends before they head to the T20 World Cup. But right now, it seems like India has the upper hand, and India will want to maintain a very good run before it heads into the finals and later on into the T20 World Cup. India will also not want to consider any associate nations also any less, and they will want to perform well.
All right, India definitely has an upper hand as its team is definitely doing very well right now. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed, for joining us and giving us all that information. And moving on with the upcoming Paris Olympics 2024, just round the corner, the Olympic torch relay made its way through the department of OSC on Thursday. Stage 60 of the relay saw torch bearers start in Copenhagen before finishing up in Bombay, where 1996 French Olympic fencing champion Sophie Pisteau lit the cauldron. Friday's stage will go from Chateau de Mercure to Soissy, Montmorency. The relay will culminate with the lighting of the cauldron in the host city Paris during the opening ceremonies of the Games on the 26th of July. And meanwhile, with just a week to go for the Paris Olympics, there are interesting facts about the marquee event. Though the opening ceremony will take place on 26th of July, but the sporting action begins on 24th of July with pool matches in football, rugby sevens, handball and archery. Take a listen.
As the world braces for sporting extravaganza, here are some interesting facts about the Paris Olympics, ranging from its opening ceremony, mascot, addition of new sports, prize money and more. The opening ceremony will be held on 26 July, but the sporting action begins on 24 July with pool matches in football, rugby sevens, handball and archery. The opening ceremony will take place along the River Seine. The first medals will be awarded on July 27. The competition will conclude on 11 August with the closing ceremony. There are 329 gold medal events. The first medal of the Games will be in shooting on July 27. The final medal will be awarded in women's basketball on 11th August. The only new sport for the 2024 Olympics is breaking. It is a style of dance that originated in New York during the 1970s but has evolved to become a competitive sport. Kayak cross will also make its debut. 4 athletes in each heat race will compete against each other. In sailing, 2 kite events have been added, and in artistic swimming, men are included for the first time in Olympic history, and team acrobatic routine round will make its debut. Baseball, softball and karate featured in Tokyo Olympics, but they have been dropped. There is change in format for sport climbing. There will be a combined medal for lead in bouldering and a separate medal event for speed climbing. The Olympic mascot is Phrygian. The name is based on the traditional small Phrygian hats. The Olympic and Paralympic mascots are shaped on it. It is a symbol of freedom through French history. The motto of the mascots is "Alone we go faster, but together we go further." World Athletics has announced a total prize pot of $2.4 million, with gold medalists receiving $50,000. Paris joins London as the only cities to host the Olympics 3 times. The Games were held in Paris in 1900, 1924 and now in 2024, while London hosted the Games in 1908, 1948 and 2012. Pratik Narayan Singh reports for DD India.
All right, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.